Hello, welcome to the next roster breakdown. This time it is of the Caledonia Gladiators, preview number 8 for this season. If you checked out all the other ones, I hope you've enjoyed them. Please get involved, like, share, subscribe as usual. But Louis and I are back, and this time, it's about the Gladiators. Obviously, a big turnaround from where they were this time last year. There's no Europe, about third different coach, maybe fourth, depending on how you look at it. New coach, new rebuild, and or a new identity, Louis.
Yeah, I I think it's going to be really fun to kind of watch what Johnny makes of this squad, because there's some interesting pieces, a lot of shooting, kind of at the 2 and the 3 spot, so, lots of interchangeable pieces for him to kind of work with. So
I suppose when we look back to this time last year, I think they would have already played their BCL qualifying game, which they got blown out, and that was kind of the start of the downfall potentially. I suppose nobody really knows what fully happened, but you've got Gareth now coaching in Europe. You've had Robbie Pearce come and go, and it's like you've now got Johnny Bunyan in and keeping the ship afloat as such. But he's been trusted with the roster for this season. Having interviewed him, if you check out our interview with Coach Bunyan on the Spotify feed, or podcast feed, you'll be able to hear what his thoughts are in his season ahead. But let's get into this. And I suppose one of the big questions I have, Louis, for this Gladiators team is the step up or potential improvement of someone like a Toto Fagbenley. 6'9", he's into second year as a pro. He became quite an important piece for the Gladiators last season, in a season of, he was probably not a positive, but a big plus point in terms of his defensive side of the game and whatnot. But the Gladiators will hopefully be looking for him to get better offensively.
Yeah, I think he was kind of a little bit of a shock last season, because, he's coming from we talked about this, like his college the season
were like the worst.
Literally one of the worst. Were literally the worst college in D1, and he didn't really do anything. His defensive kind of versatility and athleticism, as you say, just, it was very impactful. Offensively, he needs to keep, we've talked about this, he needs to keep the turnovers down. He was very loose in kind of his decision making in terms of, attacking off the catch and making quick decisions. He was very, very turnover prone, and teams kind of exploited that. And offensively, he needs to hit the free. He needs to.
There were so many times teams would just almost leave him.
Yeah, just sag off him.
Just left him.
Yeah, just leave him, sag off him. And what does that do for the rest of the Glad's offense? Yeah. What does that do for the rest of his game? Because he wants to slash, he wants to get downhill. If teams aren't closing out to him and are going to sag off him, that affects the rest of his game also. So it's something he needs to kind of, sort out, basically.
Because he was someone that was thrown into the starting lineup at times, defended a lot of quick guards with his length, and would often do something pretty good, and then we'd go down the offensive end, travel, double dribble, turn it over, lose the ball, whatever. So it's going to be a big season ahead, I suppose, to see what his growth and development is. When we look at some of the new guys, where do we start? Let's go Matthew Ragsdale, 6'5", coming from like the German second level. I'm curious. He looks like to be, I think Johnny described him as a guy who can be a lights out shooter, but I do feel like he's got quite a lot of limitations.
Yeah, so he's a swingman I think he's more so a free, despite his kind of size. He's listed at 6'4". I think it's more of a free, considering, as you say, his limitations. He, like Johnny said, he's a lights out shooter. He can hit through defensive length. Like, if they contest his shot, he can, hit tight looks, basically. He has a little bit of that kind of pump fake, one dribble off the dribble shot making. He's really good at coming off screens, kind of like. So I kind of think of like a guy like a little bit like Quinn Cooper, practically speaking. Potentially more so, a little bit more dynamic because Quinn Cooper was all catch and shoot. Ragsdale's got a little bit more kind of off the dribble, a little bit more athletically functional at the very least. But the reason why I think he's more of a free is because he's slow laterally. He's in terms of his attacking, downhill, he's very slow. That's kind of an issue. His handle is very limited. So in terms of turnovers, etc. So I'd be expecting more so like a catch and shoot guy that occasionally kind of, is asked to kind of shoot off the dribble sometimes. So yes.
And I suppose when we look at, like, I'm always curious about how it translates from one league to another. Like, Germany too seems quite structured in the way that it is. Like, how a player like Ragsdale will come to a league that's a little bit less structured,
very unstructured,
one-on-one play, and I suppose
very fast up.
And is that going to suit his offensive rhythm? That's the big question in my opinion. When you're saying he's going to be a shooter,
yeah, that is a big.
And
question.
I suppose work that out after a few weeks of the season, how he deals with that, like quick closeouts, dealing with it feels like everything's just going to be turned up a gear,
basically.
All right, let's talk about Ria'n Holland. Played in Serbia last season, 6'1" point guard. Someone that I think, again, Johnny said he's kind of wanting him to be him on the court. What's your thoughts on Holland?
Scoring, so he's a scoring combo that is more so kind of scoring focused in terms of what he's looking to do kind of as a handler. He's looking to, first off, he's very versatile in terms of his scoring game. So on ball, off ball, he's actually really good at kind of, attacking off the catch, attacking closeouts downhill. He's very quick, kind of, attacking off that. Can shoot very well. They like to play him kind of off some action sometimes in Georgia. From what I saw, he can kind of shoot off screens a little bit. They can kind of do interesting things that way. On ball, he's very quick linearly, very quick at getting to the rim in a linear fashion. Very good at finishing. He's good at finishing at the rim for a player of his size. He's got great body control, very springy in terms of finishing at the rim. So there's that, and obviously that feeds into his off-ball game with how well he attacks off the catch in terms of his finishing. Quite ISO heavy in terms of his on-ball kind of stuff. He can get a little bit, a little bit ball hoggy a little sometimes. He's got a great off the dribble game. He in terms of shooting behind the arc. In terms of, he's got a nice cross kind of pull up game, etc. That sort of thing. Good mid range game. The kind of thing is, in terms of breaking down players, he in terms of finishing at this level against a guy like Matt Nicholson, I think that's going to be a little bit of a struggle considering his size, for example. And in terms of breaking down players and getting to more efficient shots, sometimes he can settle for quite difficult shots despite his kind of overall efficiency. So those are kind of a couple of things to look for in terms of his kind of playmaking aptitude, because of how kind of scoring centric he is, and because of kind of what the Gladiators ball handlers are like elsewhere. I think that's kind of an interesting dynamic. So yes,
we'll put a pin in that. I'll try and remember to bring us back to talking about that, because that's something I want to look at when we get to the depth chart. Let's look at one of the other new guys down the list a wee bit. And one of the things, depth chart wise, the return of Jet Spielman is going to be really interesting. I'm really curious by Dalen Williams, 6'9", played in Bulgaria last year. Again, curious just to see how he adapts from, say, playing Bulgaria. His team was kind of mid-level there, and coming into this kind of league.
Yeah, he's so combo forward. Well, not combo forward, more so a 4. But I'll talk about that later. Basically, he came from Bulgaria. He played at a decent college level with Texas Rio Grande.
I love that college name.
Yeah,
I love that college name. I don't know why.
It's a cool college name. But yeah, in terms of his kind of athletic translation, I think he's a really interesting player. And I think combined with a guy like Toto, which I think in terms of squad dynamics and like kind of recruitment etc. I think they could have done something really cool there that maybe they haven't done. But Dalen Williams, I kind of foreshadowed this with when I said combo forward. He's a 4-man with kind of legit size and physicality. You know, he can defend in the post. He's very physical as a rebounder, very good rebounder, etc. I think he has the ability to kind of defend threes, basically. I think he offensively, he has in terms of like performing as a wing, in terms of, you know, catch and shoot, he's a little bit bad, a little bit below average as a shooter, but he's decent as a slasher in terms of, you know, catch, you know, drive, etc. So that's kind of decent. He's got a good vision in terms of his passing, which is really interesting. Yeah. He makes good like heads up plays in terms of, you know, when he does, you know, attack off the catch and kind of drive downhill. He's a little bit turnover prone. He's more so like a limited kind of slasher when he does play at the 4 or the potentially even the 3 spot if he wants to be interesting in that sort of sense. And then he does have some 5 skill and, you know, like I said, 5 size. Yeah, he's a very good defensive athlete. Is his kind of crux is the crux of his kind of game.
But has he got the limitations of, you're saying about that, the limitation, like when he's got the ball in hand, he can slash the basket. Is he much of a creator? We've seen in past years where
it's a good. Thank you for
because you know what, in the last few seasons we've seen a lot more kind of 4 guys being a bit more not ball dominant, but able to construct the offense. You've seen, I suppose, Aaron Rice probably the best at it. Gladiators quite often in the last season or 2 have had Prince Onwaz do it quite well, but he's someone I look at this roster. Can he do that role?
No. I should have mentioned this, but his handle's very limited, which is why he was kind of a little bit turnover prone, really. In terms of creating on ball, he's not really going to do that. He's a closeout attacker, really. That's kind of what I meant with when I said he attacks well off the catch. He attacks closeouts decently well, practically speaking, and he finishes well. So,
all right,
yeah, he's not going to be creating on ball like that.
And I suppose let's go on. Let's talk about who I think is going to be your favourite player this year. He's formally yet to be announced when we record this, but he played in the preseason game. He was at the Gladiators kind of open day as well. But Kevin Allen, 6'11", coming from South Korea last. He's been working out in London all summer. I think he's my favourite player. I think he's going to be your favourite player, Louis. Tell me exactly why that is.
I mean, we've discussed this intensely. I love him. You know? I love his game. Big man, five man. I'm actually going to surprise Grant a little bit. I am, because I did actually watch him in depth more so than I have done previously. So maybe I'm a little bit more, a little bit higher than I was, because I was very low on the signing, to be absolutely frank.
You weren't convinced,
but I was not convinced in the slightest. But anyway, post up 5 man with 6'11", good physicality, kind of a range of post moves that he can get to. The problems are kind of elsewhere. So in terms of dealing with doubles as a post player, in terms of actually his value adding, like in being able to pass out of the post, none of that. He can't pass. He makes some dumb decisions, as I showed Grant the video. As I showed in the video that I sent to Grant, he makes some dumb decisions. He was incredibly turnover prone in Romania. Like, incredibly turnover prone. He averaged 4 turnovers a game. So that's kind of an issue. In terms of defensively, that's something that I was a little bit, shocked by, was his kind of... Obviously, he looks a little bit clumsy. You know, he looks slow, but in terms of his mobility, because I watched him play in Leb Gold, Primera Feb, which is the second tier in Spain, and they have a kind of, basically you need to be able to move in that league. You know, you need to be able to move at least semi-competently, and he didn't look bad, which is kind of what I...
you really wanted them to look bad, didn't you? You wanted them to.
I mean, I was a hater. I was being a hater. I wanted to see him like look like a slug, but he doesn't look. He doesn't look. He doesn't look too slow. Okay, I'll concede on that. He isn't a very vertical athlete, like whatsoever. He'd probably struggle jumping over a piece of paper, to be honest. But so in terms of his kind of outright finishing at the basket, in terms of over contests, in terms of his kind of rim protection, that's an issue. But I mean, they'll be able to go to him in the post, and he'll be able to score at a decent rate, at a pretty good rate, but his efficiency will be off, and his passing, etc., will be off. He will be able to decently move on the defensive end. That's about it. That's me.
So you're almost saying that for the Gladiators to integrate him properly, it's almost got to be when he's on the court, he's going to be the focus of the offense. Because he's not going to be. Because he's not going to be. You're not going to be able to go inside to him and see him pass out the paint to create space, like for someone.
Yeah.
He's going to.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, you can't do that. That's not something. That's not a part of his game. Like, they will have to kind of use him a lot in the post, and he'll have to score from there or turn over or whatever. So.
All right, final one we'll look at before we go talk about the depth chart. Ethan Wright, he's moving up from the Leicester Riders. He won Sixth Man of the Year last season. It seems quite a similar tale in terms of a player coming away from Leicester looking for a bit more responsibility. And I'm really curious to see how you reckon this fit will be.
Yeah, obviously swingman, 2-3 kind of guy. Ethan Wright, like, obviously Glads want him to handle the ball more, and that's the biggest question. We already know off ball, he's a clinical player, can slash really well, can shoot at a very good clip. The question is his on ball and whether he can, because we see up the lineup, we have guys like Fraser, Toto, guys like Dalen who can't handle the ball, guys like Matthew Ragsdale who can't really handle the ball. So a big onus will be on Ethan Wright to be able to create as an on-ball handler. And that's the big question, right? There is a big downside to Ethan Wright, and that's the fact he can't use his left. He can't finish with his left. If you watch him, he can't finish with his left. So I've watched the game like when he played for Targo, a team in Romania. I watched a game where he was more of a handler, and they just kept on sending him left, and he couldn't really do anything, or couldn't create a very good rate. He was, because obviously as a handler, he's got his pull-up game in terms of behind the screen, kind of pulling from free, etc. We know he's going to be good at that, but it's whether he can kind of pressure the defense. That's what will be asked of him. Pressure the defense, obviously collapse, defenders and kick out. And whether he can do that to an adequate enough level, I kind of put a little bit of a question mark on,
So is that the greatest, before we look at the depth, is that the greatest wonder or the big question about this Gladiators roster is the ball handling quality? Like outside of Holland, or is this where we actually, we've not mentioned him yet because our returning player, I suppose, Kyle Jimenez. And let's talk about Kyle a little bit now. Obviously, he left to go with the Robbie era coming in. He left to go into Derby. If he stuck around a matter of weeks, he would have been fine. But you especially were quite high on year two Kyle last season. He looked one of the better Gladiators, which maybe says more about what was about to happen. But is this where we see Kyle maybe playing at the one with Holland? I suppose we'll talk about the depth chart in a minute, but is this where Kyle Jimenez's importance grows as that second kind of main ball handler?
Yeah, definitely. And we did see kind of Kyle play a little bit of like, because Ria'n is a combo. Yeah. He played a lot of two in Georgia, even though his size defensively is kind of an issue. We saw Kyle kind of play a little bit off ball. I mean, we do see him do that quite often. So, but then the question is, if you do have those two guards, the question is defensively, whether you can like kind of carry that with personnel elsewhere. So that's see, like, That's what lineups are, you know. That's what kind of basketball recruitment is. It's kind of like swings and levers, you know. If you do concede on one area or kind of focus on one area, you concede in another, you know. So it's kind of swings and roundabouts, you know. We know Carl Jimenez is going to be important, definitely this season. So.
Yeah. Okay, let's get the depth chart up. So when we look at this depth chart for the Gladiators, we had some back and forth on this. Do you see it? Yes, you do. And the ball handling instantly screams off the table. We had a discussion about where Ragsdale will be, and you've got in your opinion, that he's going to struggle to guard at the 2, so we move him to the 3. When you look at this lineup, there's a lot of flexibility. But is that both a good thing and a bad thing? Because that flexibility, as you say, the ball handling is really quite low down.
I think it's kind of like the inverse. I think they have a lot of defensive versatility with Fag Benley, Fraser Malcolm, Williams, etc. But I think offensive versatility is kind of lacking, right? Because they don't like we were talking about up the lineup. You know, Jet Spielman's a very kind of linear spot-up guy. Williams is a spot-up guy that's very linear, that kind of needs to attack off closeouts. Fraser's a very linear guy. You know, Toto has his like issues that we've discussed a lot. So I think it's kind of an issue with a lack of versatility rather than a lot of versatility, if that kind of makes sense. A lack of ball handling elsewhere. So
is this one of these ones where I try to think back a few seasons for the Gladiators, back when they had like Jordan Johnson and then around them they maybe had players like Jordan Harris, who's gone on to a good level, JC Hillsman's gone on to do that. But a lot of the secondary ball handling was done by Johnny Bunyan. They didn't have that presence as such. And I suppose that's where, like, when we look at this potential lineup in the depth chart, you could see a situation where Ethan Wright's second ball handler. Okay, big question is, we'll change this question right now. Ethan Wright, does he come to the Gladiators and be a starter?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they wouldn't kind of construct a roster that they have without him being that, I think.
Fair. So we're going to say it's going to be like, this is where I'm really interested to see, do you see like a Toto Fag Benley starting or a Jet Spielman, or how, like, I feel like I'm undecided.
I feel like they will do that.
Do you think they will start like a Toto somewhere?
I mean, obviously we've done the depth chart that we have, you know, but I do have a feeling that they'll start kind of Toto or Fraser at the 3 spot or 4 spot, and then have kind of like Ragsdale as kind of like a bench player potentially. That's a way that they could go. So,
but it does feel like, just from what you've said, what we're kind of agreeing on, that without Holland at the moment, they're going to be pretty orchestrated around him.
Yeah, I mean, because coming up from Georgia and kind of Serbia, it's a kind of a big ask, and he wasn't really, because I watched in Georgia, he was playing a lot off ball, like off of another guard. So, and obviously he has his playmaking deficits. So in terms of kind of roster balance and roster construction, you know, it's kind of a little bit of a concern from my perspective, you know. So, and if he gets injured, you're screwed. So,
well, let's hope he doesn't get injured. All right, let's try and, for them, I have the same, not concerns, I suppose, question marks. But who is your prophecy one to watch in this roster this season?
I mean the obvious answer would be Ria'n Holland, because he's going to have the ball in his hands a lot. But I'll be kind of off center and kind of pick Williams, because I kind of really like his kind of defensive versatility. I think that's really cool. So yeah, that guy,
Dale Williams, the prophecy one to watch. All right, this has been our Gladiators roster preview. The breakdowns will continue with Surrey. That will come out last. That'll come out last because they're the 19th, but that'll come out next week as they don't start this opening weekend. Thank you to everyone that's got involved. Again, please subscribe to the channel. And there's lots of content coming out from the SLB show. So keep getting involved, and we'll be back for our final roster preview.